Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're here with the final video for today. This is once again Warhammer 3 gameplay, but we're going to look at the Khorne unit roster, as there's a decent amount of different units, each of them with their own battlefield uses and roles, and what I wanted to do in this video, just like the Cathayan one, is go over each individual unit and start talking about their uses in campaign, their uses on the battlefield and so on, as I've had a decent amount of time playing with Khorne now, and I know some of you are quite curious given the roster since it's very heavily melee focused. So let's not waste any more time and jump right in. We're going to start off with the Chaos Warriors of Khorne, mainly because I was wrong about them. Originally when I saw the roster reveal I thought, well, they're not going to be quite useful, maybe they will because they are armoured, but that's pretty much it. And I must admit I was wrong. These are heavily armoured warrior troops which will be quite useful in your campaigns. While they will break, as for some reason they're Khornite warriors that can, you have three different variants. Armoured and Shielded, which is your tank troop, you've got the Armoured and Halberdiers, which is obviously your anti-large, and you've got your dual weapon unit, which is anti-infantry. All three of them will in fact be useful throughout your campaign, especially as you're dealing with a variety of different enemies. The fact is, I thought, well, you know, Bloodletters will be the main source here, but a lot of demons will be squishy, they don't have armor and so on. These will at least be able to hold back their own, and you can use them as, well, very violent targets. By going into specifics, the Sword and Board one has been one of my most commonly used units throughout my Khornite campaign. I'd say the majority of my armies has Warriors of Khorne. You can buff them up through technology too to make them much more viable, and really, some armor does help. I've been dealing with quite a lot of different enemies, I've been invading Kislev and so on, so having this is quite useful. The Halberdiers themselves are pretty useful in an armor-piercing sense. I've not really used them too much as an anti-large. Keep in mind that really anything that we're dealing with big monsters, you're normally having bigger monsters to fight back. They do act as good support when you're fighting Keeper of Secrets and so on, but I'm seeing more use of them when fighting against Kislev when they start getting bigger stacks than anything else. And the dual weapon variant actually does have a lot of time to shine, seeing as you're going to be dealing with a lot of Plague Bearers, a lot of Marauders of Slaanesh, the Demonettes and so on. They will prove their worth a few times over, I'd say. It's just absolutely needed if you're going to be dealing with a slosh of enemies coming at you from left, right and center. And if you're playing a Scarbrand where you're going to be getting into war constantly, you're going to need these. So there's two different units of Bloodletters, and we're going to talk about them at the same time as they pretty much fulfill the same battlefield role in a sense. The standard Bloodletter is your basic infantry. It's a tier 1, you can go and do some damage with it. It's decent, that's the best way I can say. Don't get me wrong, they can do a decent amount of anti-infantry damage and so on, but the Warriors of Khorne are much better. They've got fear, and yeah, that works too, but keep in mind that a majority of the demons also have fear too, so you're basically just nullifying it. However, the Exalted Bloodletters have more of a proper feel like they did in the tabletop, where they're able to do flaming attacks, they do more damage, they even get stronger as they do more kills. I believe it was just 80 kills. I'd say you'd have to replace the standard Bloodletters as soon as possible for either the Exalted or the Chaos Warriors, as the standard ones aren't really going to last you a long time. Gorby's chariots we're already used to as we've had them before, and they still have the same functionality. They're pretty strong, very good at shocking your enemies from the flank or the rear. I'd say that they're still one of the best units available. Their damage output is pretty good. You have them in small units, which probably works best, as cavalry units, especially chariots, can get stuck in enemy lines, but I've not really had too many issues with these. The only problem is, well, the animations are a bit odd, as the weapon of the rider goes into the one driving. It's just a bit of a visual thing that kind of annoys me. Blood Crushers of Khorne, or Juggies as they used to be called on the tabletop by the fans, are very powerful, very heavy cavalry. They are mounted upon by Exalted Bloodletters, which makes them even stronger as they get more kills. Once again, I believe it was 80. They are armoured, armor-piercing, they are anti-infantry. They're pretty good, I've used them quite often. You start with 2, I believe, if you play Khorne, which is quite powerful, especially since their speed isn't too bad. Their quite high armor will also make sure that they stay in the battlefield a little longer, which obviously a lot of demons don't have such a high armor output. It's going to be quite useful. I've been using them quite heavily, and yeah, I must say, no complaints. The human variant, the Skull Crushers, are just as good. They have a lot more armor, 130 to be in fact, and they can do a decent amount of damage output, also being anti-infantry, armor piercing too. getting frenzy. The only thing is, since they don't have the extra benefit of getting stronger as they kill, they're probably just not as good, though both seem to work quite well. You can use them in unison. In fact, one of my armies, which unfortunately I can't show because it's later than the current turn limit, is pretty cav focused because I wanted to test it out, and it's got a mixture of both, plus a herald on a juggernaut and a blood reaper on a juggernaut because I thought that would be kind of cool. And it's kind of satisfying. That's pretty much all I can say. They're cool, they're more terrifying on the tabletop, but I'd say that these do the job as they need to. Oh boy, Chaos Warhounds. Okay, so a lot of you might think that I don't like these units, but in Game 3, they've been fairly useful. Khorne can recruit them like right off the bat as soon as you take over a settlement and so on. So they aren't too bad. 95 speed is really, really good. Vanguard does help and so on. It does take a while to be able to justify them as a unit because they are relatively weak and you can use them for flanking, but we've got other units for that too. I would say that very early on, it's still better than nothing and you do need to get some troops out. But they're still Chaos Warhounds. Furies, on the other hand, have proven to be a bit more useful to me. While their stats are pretty bad, their speed is incredible. And really the big benefit is they are one of 2 flying units that you have access to. Early on, if you need a flanker, I'd say Furies over Warhounds. You can have your Bloodletters going up forward and then the Furies flying behind. Yes, they're not as good in terms of stat-wise and so on, but this means that you can pick off any stragglers without too much of an issue. The Warhounds are fast, but being able to fly over terrain or over other units and so on is so much better, and some other factions do have some flying units, so if you need a tar pit, this is the best way to go. Don't get me wrong, they're still horrible, but at least they have somewhat of a purpose. But if you want a proper Vanguard unit that can also deal decent damage, you want the Fleshhounds of Khorne. These are the demonic Doberman that Khorne has bred himself, and yeah, they are pretty good. Their speed rivals that of the Warhounds, but they've got a lot better in terms of damage output. You can also decently upgrade them quite well, so it's not too much of a, yeah, you just want a fast unit, but more so you want a fast unit that can do some decent damage too. I thought that these were pretty useful. I've got a few in my campaigns if I ever need a runner and so on, and yeah, they're not too bad. They're not too bad at all. Chaos Spawn of Khorne. Alright, this is pretty interesting. So yeah, they're pretty much Chaos Spawn. I can't really spin it in any better way. They do decent damage and so on. I feel like this was just one of those reskin units that were just put in just to flesh out the roster, which, yeah, fair enough. But if they could have gotten some buffs by doing extra damage or the more kills and so on, just like the Bloodletters, but a smaller effect, that would have been kind of nice. Because I'll be very honest with you, I have not recruited one throughout my campaign, and I don't intend to, and I've played multiple Khorne campaigns at this point, I'd say. Okay, Khornators. We're going to talk about the both of them together as they're pretty similar. They are both pretty good at doing damage, armor piercing mostly. They've got some decent armor too. One of them is obviously anti-large, whilst the other one is anti-infantry, and they both got blood greed. I'd say that these were far more useful in terms of the other stuff that they brought from other races. Khornators I was not expecting. I was honestly expecting Khorngors, but this, you know, they're fast, they're able to do damage quickly, they can throw themselves into the thick of it without too much of an issue. I must admit that I haven't used them too much because they stand out a lot from the army in terms of, you know, mortal, demon, and then just random beastmen. But I do have one army full of Khornators because I thought it would be kind of funny, and yeah, it's alright. It's nothing wow-worthy, but they're pretty useful. The Soul Grinder of Khorne is pretty fun itself. It's a mid-range artillery piece, but really it's not. It does have a ranged weapon, it can do some decent damage on it, but the main thing that you want with the Soul Grinder is just to take it into combat. It can fire on the move, just make it just go in there and rip apart everything. Like, I love watching these things fight, it is incredible. Like, just throw 2 Soul Grinders of Khorne in front of a horde and just let them do their thing. It's that good. Honestly, very, very fun unit. I would say that maybe not the most essential, but its damage output and its animations are cool, so yeah, rule of cool kind of wins here. The Bloodthirster is one of your big monstrous units. In fact, it's one of the most important Khornate demons throughout the history of Warhammer Fantasy lore. And yeah, it can fly, it's good on foot too, so you can have it on both. It's armor piercing, anti-large, causes terror, flaming attacks. It's kitted out to kill big monsters. You see that Great Unclean one? It'll go for that. You see that Keeper of Secrets, the Changer of Ways. The fact is that if you see a big monster, just throw a Bloodthirster at it. I've been doing so so, and they are really good at getting the job done. Really, really good. I've not yet to try out a full bloodthirster stack, but I imagine that it's absolutely hilarious. You do have an artillery piece known as the skull cannon, and this is a staple once again of the demon rosters. It's really, really powerful, armored, armor-piercing, anti-infantry, flaming attacks. Now, the thing is, you'll notice it's got, what, 12 ammunition there, and you'll eventually run out. Well, you want more? Just throw the skull cannon into melee combat, and as it does damage, it will regenerate ammunition, which is, fun and unexpected. It can definitely hold its own in combat too, so don't get too worried about it. It's well armored and so on. I was quite surprised. This doubles not only as an actual artillery piece, but a chariot too. Very impressive damage output. It looks pretty grim. A lot of people are saying it's 240k-ish, but yeah, this was a Warhammer Fantasy model too. The Bloodletters of Khorne is a buffer unit, but it's also doubling as a magical chariot, so you can easily take it into combat and, yeah, let it do its thing. You don't have to worry about it, it's well armored too, it'll stand without actually getting destroyed for a decent amount of time, plus it will regenerate once it's in combat too. This type of unit needs to be in the front line. It buffs up your troops and, well, you want that type of buff stuff, especially with Khorne being a little bit weaker in terms of not having any range and so on, the skull cannon. You want your output of damage to be as quick as possible and as hard as possible too. The Blood Shrine will definitely help. You can also have this as a mount for your Blood Reaper and your Herald, which we'll discuss in a second. So you don't need a unit version unless you really want to, of course. And I'll be very honest with you with this one. The Cultists of Khorne, I was pleasantly surprised. I honestly thought I wasn't going to really recruit them and so on, but I got one from an event for free, and I realized that the Cultist of Khorne itself is pretty decent. The character itself isn't a buffer per se, but he's got a few. He's able to do a decent amount of damage. He's able to summon in Bloodletters and multiplayer. In campaign, he can summon 3 units of Bloodletters and even a bloodthirster if it's upgraded enough. So yeah, I was really, really surprised. I thought there was going to be no reason to use this guy whatsoever, but it turns out if I wanted extra troops, especially if I knew I was going to get into big warfare, I needed at least one of these dudes to be able to summon in some reinforcements. The only thing I'd say is it's a shame that he doesn't ride a juggernaut, but then again all the cultists should kind of ride their own monogod specific mounts. The Blood Reaper is your buffer but also melee hero. You can have 2 different mount options too, the Juggernaut or even the Blood Throne, and it depends on what you want to use. Either way, they can still benefit from all the buffs as the locusts themselves are a skill point, and you can pretty much tailor the character as you wish. Generally, getting them mounted is probably the best option as both mounts are quite strong and will make them a lot hardier. But as it stands, it's a very good hero, very fun to use, and probably the one that you'll be using more commonly than the cultist itself. The Herald of Khorne is very much the same as the Blood Reaper, even having the same skills in a sense with the Locust and also the same mount options. Its damage output is quite good, it'll get stronger as it does damage and so on, and really it is your only Lord option to recruit directly, which is a bit strange considering that all the others have different Heralds with different laws of magic. But even then, it's still very strong. That was just me nitpicking, but still, Khorne still stands as one of the strongest gods. His roster is very, very strong. And the Herald himself is able to hold his own out, even stronger when he's mounted, I'd say. But I've also been preferring him on foot, moving around with all my extra bloodletter stacks. Though the Herald of Khorne itself is pretty much just the gateway to the Exalted bloodthirster, which you'll need to rank up all the way to 15, and then you might have the chance of it proccing. Sometimes it's a few turns later, sometimes it's the very next turn. It's very RNG focused there, but this is an absolute powerhouse of a monster. Very, very powerful, very capable of taking out other Exalted demons without too much of an issue. The more you boost him up, the more damage he does. I've got one at a pretty high rank, and I took on 2 Exalted Great Unclean ones with, like, no issue whatsoever. It's extremely powerful. You can see from the stats, you can see all the abilities that he's got there. He's there to kill, and he does that very, very well. I know the Khorne roster is very, very samey, and in fact it pretty much is, but it's there to do one thing and one thing alone, and that's just do damage. It might take some getting used to, especially for other players who aren't used to range and so on. I know I struggled a little bit, but once you get your bearings around it, it's not too much of an issue. You start kind of grasping the concept. Just be hyper aggressive, keep fighting, and you'll have Exalted Bloodthirsters and big demons in no time. But with all that being said, what do you think about Khorne's roster and stats and so on? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below and let's start a bit of a discussion. I might be a bit slow with responses. I have been non-stop going back and forth to work whilst I've been recording, and I'm really tired and I need a nap though. Just letting you guys know in advance, as I don't do this full time. I've got a full-time job and it's becoming kind of hectic at the moment. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel's been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.